Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons metrics. What are the numbers we know right now about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition? What are the numbers that we don't know? And what is going to happen in the future? Are we going to know more or less about the numbers for Dungeons & Dragons? Let's jump right into it. So I'm really fascinated. I know I'm interested, and I know you guys are interested in the numbers for Dungeons & Dragons. So one of the things that recently happened was there was a Hasbro investors meeting, and there was information that came out about Dungeons & Dragons in that. But I thought it was very, way over-reported by Dungeons & Dragons commentators without a lot of analysis, which was a little disheartening to me. So here's what we want to know, and here's what we found out. So what did we find out? We found out that Dungeons & Dragons as a brand had done better the year before, had done better in this last year than they did in the previous year before that. So in the last 12 months, they did better than they did in 12 to 24 months beyond. Like, so negative year one, they did better than negative year two, into the past. That's really all we know. We don't really get much more than that. So we also know Hasbro, that Wizards of the Coast did very well for Hasbro overall. And Hasbro's announced that they're going to do a new division. But we don't know if Dungeons & Dragons is doing great and is really crushing it at all, right? What we really know is that Wizards of the Coast is doing great. Now here's the problem with that. Magic is an absolute beast when it comes to numbers. Magic the Gathering makes a crap ton of money. Way more money than Dungeons & Dragons. I do not think that Dungeons & Dragons has outsold Magic the Gathering and made more money for Hasbro since they bought it in 1999. Not 1 year. I don't think not one single year has Dungeons & Dragons outsold Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering has a fundamentally better business model because it's built on collectability and it drives sales, right? Whereas the tabletop role-playing game business model is absolutely horrific. It is terrible, right? You sell, okay, here's D&D 5e's business model. Here's your PHB, here's your DMG, here's your monster manual. They cost you $150 if you paid retail, right? And you don't need to talk to us for another 10 years. You could play 1,000 hours of stories with those games and not want for anything else. And you could find hundreds of websites that will give you free NPCs, including Wizards of the Own site, right? They'll give you more than enough to continue to play for nothing forever, right? And you really don't need to buy anything. I'm incredibly blessed, and I want to thank you as listeners. I feel a lot of pressure to make my own personal Dungeons & Dragons game really epic and stellar because I commentate on Dungeons & Dragons. And I will tell you right now, there's a lot of D&D commentators out there that talk a lot about D&D and are not running a current game, right? Which I got beef with. If you're a D&D commentator and you're not running a game, you should probably consider stop talking about D&D Dungeons & Dragons as a commentator, right? Because there's so many, there's so many ways you can overcome the obstacles, and it just drives me crazy to see people giving advice for something they're not actually doing. It happens a lot, okay? Let me stay on target here. So here's the issue. So there's all these numbers coming out of Dungeons & Dragons. So let me get to the point where I was heading. So I have a great Dungeons & Dragons game that I'm playing weekly. We play Sunday, we play first, second, and third Sunday, and we take fourth Sunday off. We take fourth Sunday off because Cody from Taking 20 gave that idea, and it was a brilliant idea. It really helped. And it keeps the game fresh. It's a great idea. So we play weekly minus 1 week a month, right? And it's going great. And I got this player who is so enamored with the game. Just every week he thanks me and says, I really appreciate all the time you put into this. And this is my favorite thing that's happening each week that I do with my recreational time. It beats the video games I'm playing. It beats, the movies I'm watching. It beats the television. And I'm really thankful that he's saying this, right? He's like, what can I do to make this game? What can I buy? How can I help? There's nothing for me to tell him to go buy. It's pretty bad, right? I have all the books if I feel guilty because if I tell him to buy a book, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to put the content in. And, and he just literally goes to the hobby shop every week and buys new dice because the Dungeons & Dragons business model Like, the model for selling product is actually, it's a tabletop role-playing game model is so bad, right? It's just so bad, right? And this is one of the reasons why I'm saying we need to bring product placement in. The community really needs to give these tabletop role-playing game companies new ways to earn money. And we're so bad at this as a community, right? One of the things is, like, every class should have their own dice. Every lineage should have their own dice, right? And you can go out and buy those, right? And you can buy, you know, like, give me a set of dice for every skill, right? Like, you just sell me everything, man. I want it all. I want more ways to use my money and be happy about the game, right? But our community is the exact opposite, right? I can't tell you how much flack Star Wars got for having custom dice. It was terrible, right? They literally cut, there was reports, there were people who thought that Star Wars, FFG Star Wars, was cut out of award ceremonies and denied awards it could have won because the community is so against custom dice because they can only be used in that game. That's horrendous, okay? So let's stay on target here. What these D&D metrics, right? So we got this information that Wizards of the Coast is doing great, but we don't have the separated metrics. We don't know what D&D did and what Magic the Gathering did. That's a problem. That is a real problem, right? By the way, if I'm wrong on any of this, please correct me in the comments below, right? But this is my understanding. I'm just saying my understanding. But the real numbers we want, they're not there. Okay, so one of the things is how many Dungeons & Dragons players are actually existent in America and in the world. We don't know that number, right? The closest I've heard is, I think I heard in like 2019 that there are 10 million Dungeons & Dragons players, right? But I've heard numbers as high as 40 million players, right? And worldwide. And so we don't have clarity on how many Dungeons & Dragons players there are. Here's one. How many of each book for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has been sold? How many 5th edition books, hardbacks, were sold? How many 4th edition? How many 3rd edition? How many 2nd edition? How many 1st edition? We don't know these numbers, right? The reality is D&D metrics are a mess. They are a hot mess, okay? And here's the sad news. We don't really know the numbers we want to know. We really don't. And it is frustrating, right? Because one of the things I'd love to know is, do adventures outsell utility books and setting books? If they don't, get rid of them for all the goodness of goodness. Please get rid of these adventures. They're just the worst, right? I want utility books. I want setting books. These adventures are clogging up the pipe, and they're dross. They're not useful to anyone, right? But again, we don't have any numbers to make these claims, to even make informed requests of Wizards of the Coast. Now, why should we have these numbers? I think consumers have a right to these numbers, okay? Now, I hear you. You're like, wait, Scott, why should a company just tell people their numbers? Because it's healthy for the industry and it's healthy for the nation, okay? You know how I know that? Because I know movie numbers, right? Before the pandemic, movie numbers were clear as day. You got reports every week how much money every single movie made. You got reports on what their budgets were, right? And so you could compare movies to movies, and you could say these kind of movies are doing great, these kind of movies are doing bad, right? And it helped the industry to shape and say we want more of this and we want less of that, right? It was really, really helpful. So metrics are important. Metrics are genuinely important, right? And D&D, at the national level, at the commercial level in America, D&D, and actually everything I'm saying is D&D, is American specific, right? And the only reason why is I'm not highly concerned with the international tabletop role-playing game market because I don't play in it. I play in the American market, right? All right. So with that said, we don't know these numbers, and we desperately need these numbers, and I'm convinced the U.S. would benefit if we had these numbers, and the industry would benefit if we had these numbers, right? And there is precedence in America and in other American industries where these numbers were public. And there's precedence that having those numbers was quite helpful to the overall public itself, right? This was really good. And actually, it's been really bad with the pandemic. All this stuff has started to break down. Now, here's the kicker. Are D&D metrics going to get better or worse? They're going to get a lot worse. Here's why, okay? We have the tools to collect data better than we've ever had before, ever. But it does not matter. Everything that happens in the world that is commercial, and Dungeons & Dragons is a commercial product, contains three things: tools, processes, and people. And our tools for collecting data and having Dungeons & Dragons metrics is going through the roof, better and better and better and better. We can have better tools that can get these numbers for us faster, better, more accurately every single day. Okay. Now those are mostly algorithms and distribution tools and logistics and all these kind of things. The tools are getting better every single day, but it doesn't matter. The data will get worse. The Dungeons & Dragons metrics will get worse. Here's why. The processes are worse and the people are worse. And the process and the people are mixed. The people are worse as far as giving good, truthful, helpful data to the industry and to the public. Okay? And we've seen this massively in the pandemic, right? All kinds of numbers have been fudged, right? Why are numbers fudged for data? Numbers are fudged for data because people don't want to admit the truth, because often the truth doesn't help them get the things they want to get, whether that's re-election, whether that's the ability to get additional contracts, whether that's the ability, whatever, right? And so the reality is people are finding out more and more that they can accomplish more commercially when they're silent about their numbers. Netflix does this. Netflix really doesn't share their numbers at the macro level about what shows do better than others, okay? And they've started giving some information about this, and other streaming services have given some information about this. Like, one of the things that started happening was that you would get top 10 lists from streamers, right? And streaming services. And people got excited until they realized that some streaming services, there were reports that they were changing the top 10 per person, right? So if you were in this region, you got a top 10 here, and in this region, you got a top 10 here, right? So the reality is, while we have better tools to get D&D metrics all the time, the people involved, right, are highly motivated to keep silent and keep the metrics and keep the numbers unavailable to the public, which having been a movie fan for a long time and having public information for a long time and seeing how incredibly beneficial that is, it breaks my heart. And the processes, that's the other issue, is the processes of how do you collect the data, how do you disseminate the data, what frequency, all that. The process is often crafted by the people because they want to spin a narrative with numbers. So when you hear numbers about D&D, about Dungeons and Dragons, ask yourself, are these the numbers we care about? Are these the numbers that are being given to us to shape a narrative? And that's upsetting to me. I would really like some real numbers on Dungeons and Dragons. I would like to know how much each of the 5e hardcover books sold. How many D&D players are there in the U.S.? Is the number going up? Is the number going down? Right? What are the demographics? I would love to know these numbers, right? It takes some risk, right, for Wizards of the Coast to release these numbers, right? It might be a little chafing and uncomfortable for them, right? But it is actually very, very, very beneficial for the industry and for our nation. And I would really like them to consider doing this. So the reality is, I'm very sad. I think that D&D metrics are going to be even more obscured than they already are, right? Am I wrong? Do you think that we will start to get some of these numbers where we haven't before? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.